Hello, and thank you for watching. I want to talk today about a topic that something I've been thinking about for a while. It is a little bit more controversial, although depending on the audience, it may not be as much as it is in my real life. I want to talk about homosexual marriage. I have a lot of conservative Christian friends, and that tends to be one of the issues I'm most likely to disagree with them about. So we talk about it periodically, and the more that we discuss it, the more I'm convinced that the laws like DOMA and Prop 8 and stuff like that are not only wrong, but really ineffective strategies. I think that they're partly reactionary, in the sense that Christians realize that homosexuality is becoming more popular, it's more widely accepted, and they're afraid. I think the motivation for a lot of these laws is fear, that a fear of anti-discrimination lawsuits against churches and hate speech lawsuits as well. And I think that those fears are justified, but that the suggested solution is unfounded. So I think it's important because I think libertarians and Tea Party conservatives, who are often Christians, are natural allies, and we really should work together in defeating status and in working towards greater liberty. Under the current system that we have, it's really our best recourse is to use the political system, and there's not enough libertarians to have a major effect on that. So we're going to be able to get much more accomplished if we work with the conservative Republicans. So that being said, I think it's important to understand why conservatives are against gay marriage. Like I said, I think it is somewhat out of self-defense, because they're afraid, not necessarily. And people's rights have been infringed. There have been lawsuits, not so much in the U.S., but in Europe. I know there was one in the UK. They're suing the Church of England for not permitting homosexual marriage in their churches. There's a couple of hate speech lawsuits where people have been fined, I think Canada and somewhere else in Europe. And then in the U.S., I think the most significant one that I'm aware of is the New Mexico photographer who refused her services to a homosexual couple, and they sued her, and she ended up losing in the New Mexico Supreme Court. And the one thing that I think is interesting about that is that the CATO Institute did issue a statement defending the photographer, defending her rights to her viewpoint, which I think is good, that it's at least one-sided, that the libertarians will support Christians whose rights are being infringed through the anti-discrimination lawsuits. I think it needs to go the other way as well. I think Christians need to stop focusing so much on defining marriage in law, defending marriage in law, because it's really, first of all, it's wrong to infringe on other people's freedom. And then secondly, it's not an effective strategy. It's not effective persuasion. You can say, you have to agree with me, or I'm going to harm you in some way. And you might be able to get the person to say that they agree with your position, but you're going to be far less persuasive to them in any kind of real sense than if you sat down with them and had a conversation and showed them respect and honesty. It's just so ineffective to try to use the force of government to change people's views or beliefs. I don't know of any cases in which that has worked. And, and I think it's okay for Christians to try to use persuasion to convince people to change their views or their behaviors. They can there's a lot of arguments about the Bible saying that it's wrong, and I think those are fair arguments, except that I think you need to be even in your application of biblical condemnations on behaviors, because the most relevant parallels are going to be things like adultery and fornication, and I don't think you can necessarily pick and choose which sins you're going to make a big deal out of and which ones you're going to say, well, we'll kind of let that one slide. I mean, that's really illogical to do that. The second argument that's commonly asserted is the natural law argument, the testimony of nature, the natural order of things, which I think is also fair, but is not a justification for the use of the force of law in trying to prevent people from doing something that is not harming anyone else. And when Christians support the defining marriage laws, they tend to make the argument that they are harming other people, that the rights of the Christians are being violated, and that is true in the sense of these anti-discrimination laws, where churches are being forced to either pay fines or to provide services that they believe are wrong. So I think that the best way to address that is to go after the anti-discrimination laws themselves and not try to fight, an invalid use of force with another equally invalid rights violation. It's that doesn't make sense, but it does make sense to try to repeal the anti-discrimination laws. And that may be a lot to ask. It may be the anti-discrimination views are very deeply enshrined in American culture. And I have a tough time, even when I'm talking to Christians that would agree with me on most things. They tend, if I try to say that these laws trying to prevent discrimination are unjust, they'll say, oh no, people can't discriminate. That's a really bad thing. They need to be stopped from doing that. And I've used the argument with some success, at least with Christians, that, well, so do you think that churches should be forced to perform homosexual marriages? Because that would be, because if they don't, that's discrimination. And most Christians will say, well, no, if they're forced to do that, that's a violation of their rights. It's a violation of their liberty of conscience, freedom of religion. They understand that the churches have a right to just make that decision. And so I say, okay, well, there is no right not to be discriminated against. You don't have a right to fairness. you just don't, because people discriminate all the time. I mean, if I say I am not gonna get married to any redheads that are shorter than 5'10", I'm discriminating. And so is a 5 foot tall redhead gonna sue me and say, well, you have to marry me because otherwise you're discriminating, and that's not right, and you have no legal right to discriminate against me. Well, no. Everybody knows that that's an absurd case. People use discrimination. People use critical thinking. People make decisions as to what they want and preferences, over who they want to associate with, and that's not a bad thing. And I think those are good arguments that should be made. I think libertarians need to make those arguments to conservatives. And I know that there's the impression that especially conservative Christians are very set in their opinions, very irrational, very illogical, and I think that is somewhat of a misconception. I think that some Christians are very stubborn and very close-minded, and that is the case. But I don't think that's true of everybody. I think that there are people who love liberty, who are also Christians, who are logical and who will listen to reasonable arguments. Arguments like that. That show that discrimination is not a rights violation, but that anti-discrimination laws are. And I really don't think, I know that it's going to be a tough fight to try to get those kind of laws repealed, but I don't think that we have another option. I don't think that trying to, enshrine other rights infringements that are designed to protect Christians and Christian values, I don't think that that's an effective strategy. It's not going to be effective for very long, and I think we really need to work together. So if you're a libertarian, I would really be interested in arguments that you found to be effective, and because trying to defend discrimination can be a difficult thing. I think that there are good arguments. I think the argument that capitalism, when unhindered by the state, disincentivizes and penalizes discrimination is a good one. I think, but at the same time, people think that it's not strong enough. They think that it wouldn't be enough of a penalty or enough of a hindrance to disincentivize discrimination to the extent they would feel comfortable with. But I think there are good arguments out there, and I would love to hear more of, like, if anybody has found something that's particularly effective in arguing that these laws are unjust. And if you're a Christian and you disagree with me about laws like DOMA and Prop 8, I would be open to hearing your arguments as well. I'm sure there's arguments that I didn't address, and I would like to discuss those further. So, I guess let me know what you think. I feel, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I wanted to get some feedback as to what other people think. So let me know, and thank you for watching.